Hi everyone! Thank you for joining us and welcome to today's Understood Expert Chat. My name is Meg and I'm on the Understood team. Today we'll be talking about preparing for middle school and high school transitions. Joining us today is Mark Griffin, founding headmaster of the Eagle Hill School. Mark, could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Thanks, Meg. I've been a practitioner, both a psychologist and a special educator in the field of learning disabilities for a little over 4 decades. Have had the opportunity to be up close and personal with 3,000 or 4,000 children who pass through our school, which is both a boarding and a day school in southern Connecticut. And these were kids who had significant learning problems and significant attention issues as well. So we were dealing with kids who other people, very good people, tried to in programs that were part-time or were trying to be piecemeal together, and they really needed a full-time integrated program. So I've had, luckily and fortunately, a lot of opportunity to work with kids directly as a practitioner, and also to have the opportunity to oversee a school that grew from 17 to 250 kids, and has put an awful lot of kids back into traditional general education with very good skills. So I'm delighted to be here today, and these transitions from elementary to middle and middle to high school tend to be challenging for kids with learning and attention issues and their parents, and for the teachers and other professionals that work with them at times.
Thanks, Mark. Well, before we start, there's just a few things about how our chat works. If you look to your screen on the right, you'll see a chat box. This is where you can ask your questions of Mark. You can either ask them anonymously, or you can tell us your name and where you're from. For now, just say hi, let us know that you're with us, and this is your chance to really get some answers from Mark. Mark, we had some questions come in today via Facebook, so we'll start with some of those from our audience there. Anne asks about her 6th grader who struggles with writing, organization, and follow-through. He was an AB student in 4th and 5th grade, but took a very long time to complete homework and sometimes even needed extra time or just wouldn't finish. With no diagnosis or IEP, they tried to get an evaluation, but he didn't qualify. What's the best way to approach the when, the how, the what, to communicate with 8 teachers to get ahead of the issues they may have moving into middle school? And then is there a way to improve on these skills and stay on top of assignments without enabling helplessness?
Those are 10 great questions. So let me try to answer them a little bit in sequence. First of all, the changeover from elementary school to middle school has so many different sort of facets to it. Part of it is the logistics alone, 1 teacher or 2 teachers to now 8 teachers, which is in and of itself very interesting. And for kids who don't tend to manage change and doing things differently so well, to have to now manage 8 different teaching styles, even if they're somewhat close, to manage 8 different sets of expectations, to have a sense of how they fit into this long list of people who are trying to help them, becomes really, really difficult. And for you as a parent, having watched a youngster work very hard, and I'm assuming the ABs means he was able to achieve A's and B's in 4th and 5th grade with a lot of work, a lot of follow-through, more time. And unfortunately for him, the task has just become more difficult. There's more volume. It's harder. The expectations are higher. I would say run, don't walk to your local school system and try to have them set up a meeting, even if with all the help he had in elementary school and your good work and his good work, he didn't qualify for special services as he was leaving elementary school. Documenting very closely what you're seeing at home and meeting with those 8 teachers to get a sense of what they're seeing in classes really will be very, very helpful. The issues around middle school and middle school teachers doing what we call formative assessment, that is trying to take a look at their own instructional strategies and methodologies and how kids are responding to them, is probably the most critical part of what you're going to want to know. You're seeing at the end of the day what is the result of his trying to juggle a bunch of balls in the air that are more difficult to juggle and take more time and require more effort than he was used to putting into in elementary school. And it sounds like he really had a lot going on in elementary school where he had to work very hard. It'll be critically important to get these teachers to both understand exactly who he is, and even if the evaluation didn't say that he needed special services, there's probably lots of good information that came out of that evaluation that should be shared, and to get a sense for yourself how teachers are teaching, what the expectations are. And you know your youngster better than anybody does. So knowing what the expectations are, knowing what teachers are looking for in terms of independence and self-advocacy and follow-through, things that may be difficult for him, you can begin to have a really good kind of relationship with schools. Most schools are highly interested in good parent-school relationships and good family-school relationships. And they may think at this point in time that things are okay, or if they were okay, they're only a little bit not so okay right now. You're seeing a very different scene at home. You're seeing a frustrated youngster, one who feels he's overwhelmed, one who feels he can't measure up where he'd done pretty well in elementary school. It's best to get at this right now and schedule a meeting, call a meeting, bring all your information in, have your questions lined up as succinctly but as ordered as you possibly can, and try to work as a team to problem solve for this. Your child deserves from the school the opportunity to be as successful as he possibly can, and under the response to intervention or multi-tier systems of support, and I honestly don't know if your school has that kind of program in place, you don't need to be identified to get services. You can get a lot of services long before you reach the tier that says you need special education services. And schools that use that problem-solving model can really help kids and you understand better how to work within what is a very new system and a much more demanding system. And there really is formal help available without having to have an IEP.
Well, thank you. I think you made a lot of really good points in there. A word that I heard you say a lot was relationship. And I think even for the mom, it's going to be a lot more relationships to manage this year with many more teachers. And so what you can do to build and learn with those, like your points, is really helpful. So the same mom, Anne, said that her sixth grader chose art for his elective. He doesn't like writing and drawing, and sometimes has trouble making decisions when there's endless opportunities and unlimited options, but he wants to learn to draw what he imagines. So we've heard that some kids with learning and attention issues really excel in the arts and creativity, but for those who don't, is there a way that art can be a tool to improve fine motor skills and creative skills without just being frustrating like many other subjects can be?
Sure, and I think, this particular mom has already thought this through very well, which is wonderful for her youngster. Art does not have to be, the nice thing about art in most middle schools, it does not have to be what anybody else wants it to be. So you do have a lot of latitude. It may be helpful when you have this meeting, as soon as you possibly can, that the art teacher is included and that you talk directly about the fact that he'd really like to. This is something, even if he can't be great at it, he has a lot of interest, he has some passion about it, and he wants to at least give it a try in a way that's reasonable. And again, most teachers, particularly art teachers, who have a fair amount of latitude in terms of what they will accept as being good work and self-expression and really something that might be different than the rest of the class is doing, but very much in tune with what this youngster's strengths are and what he really wants to do. That's what formative assessment is all about. It's really taking a look at what you're getting in terms of feedback, given what your instruction is. And if the teacher knows that his biggest desire in life in terms of art classes is to be able to do some of the things that he's thinking in his head that he'd like to put down on paper, I think that gives her or him a lot of information as to where to start and how to do it. It may well be that he can start with stencils, that he can use forms and things that don't really require him to be so good at the fine motor part of things, and then do pieces of this project freehand, and maybe with the help of an occupational therapist if the school has one, or somebody who's good at fine motor handwriting kinds of things, that they can incorporate the two of these things together. So I think we have to keep in mind that in situations like art or music, you don't end up having to be an extraordinarily good artist or a great musician, particularly in middle school. The funnel gets a little smaller in high school, and the funnel gets even smaller in college to be involved in those things. the kids should have an opportunity to pursue their passion. And most art teachers are very, very good at taking that and being innovative about how to both help in the fine motor part, which will be useful for him in a lot of his classes, particularly if they don't use a lot of technology, but also to acknowledge that when you like to do something, you don't have to be great at it. You just have to have enough skill that you feel that you're good enough.
I love your point about not having to be good at it in middle school in the funnel. I think that's really encouraging for a lot of our parents to just, at this point, let kids explore. And that idea about, some of it can be stenciled and some it can be freehand, that's something even that they can implement at home, which I think is really great advice. Cynthia is kind of talking about moving into middle school and going from having one general ed teacher to 6. And she's wondering how to communicate to all 6 of these gen ed teachers about the IEP and that it's the lesson plan. And when they deviate from that IEP without kind of thinking about consequences, that it puts her daughter and even, the teacher at a disadvantage. So this is a transition she says that she's anticipated, but it's one that they always struggle with. So she's kind of looking for tips there.
Sure, and I don't think it's even a lesson plan. It's much more than that. I'm just going to get something off my screen here, which is obscuring you. It's gone now. That's good. It's really a contract between the parent and the school. An IEP is really a promise. We've all agreed that these are this youngster's strengths. These are the areas that need some work. These are the things we're going to do to make the strengths even more strong. Here's a lot of things that we're going to do, and we're going to take a look at how we're doing with them to help him in the areas of need. So it's way more than a lesson plan. It is truly a contract. And they are, all schools, not just this particular school, are bound by law to treat this as a contract and to do the very best they possibly can to make sure that the things everybody agreed upon made sense to do are being done every single day. And so if you honestly feel that the IEP either is not being implemented for a variety of different reasons, or that it's being changed and some of the things that are being done in terms of instruction or in terms of reinforcement or in terms of any kind of methodology work the teachers are using in the classroom is not what you talked about in an IEP, it's critically important to remind people, in a nice way, but to remind people that we all agreed this is what made sense, and we all agreed we'd try it for a while, and usually there's a set number of weeks before you sit down again and say, okay, so where are we? What happened? What was really good about this? What things worked? What things did you have to modify? It's never going to be perfect, but the idea that people have deviated from what everyone agreed was the right thing to do. I think parents have both a right, which is really important, but the responsibility of their child to come in and say, I may be reading this wrong, maybe I'm just not getting this the way that it's really happening, but what I'm seeing at home and what I'm hearing is this, and we were really excited about this IEP. We thought it was the right one. We really felt that everybody had agreed this is what we should try for a while and see if we'd get the kind of results and outcomes we wanted. And I just get the sense that we're not going along the path we all agreed upon. So help me out here. I'd love to come in and meet with all of you and get a sense how you're integrating this, because it's an individualized education plan that needs to be integrated. If people aren't talking to one another, it's very, very hard to implement the plan unless people understand what other people are doing in the history class and what people are doing in the math class and the English lit class and the science class, because all of those things are going to impact your youngsters' outcomes. So again, it's a contract. So we go in and we talk about the contract one more time. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It can be in the spirit of, let's take a look. Maybe we have to take a look sooner than we thought, but right now it doesn't appear to be working. So let's take a look, let's talk, and let's adjust things if we need to. But we would always say, don't wait and hope it straightens itself out, because every lost day of instruction for kids who really need directed, explicit instruction is just so unhelpful that the sooner you can get at it and agree once again to either continue with the plan or modify the plan, the more likely your youngster's going to have better outcomes. And I hate to say it's that simple, but it truly is.
Well, I think it's good for parents to hear that an IEP doesn't have to be set in stone for the school year, that it's something that can kind of be malleable and change as the student, you see what's working and what isn't. And you also mentioned having the history teacher and the science teacher integrate this in together. And that kind of leads us to a question that we received from Ustream user Janet and Jay. And they said, do schools often have a set communication in place? She's a stay-at-home parent who's in front and center saying they're there to help, but kind of having trouble connecting with all of the teachers. There's 7 per child. So what's the best tip you can give for getting those teachers all together in communication?
Schools, like anything else, schools are going to develop. I wouldn't say there's any set way that schools are mandated to communicate, but usually culturally, schools, and I mean individual buildings, individual middle schools, have developed a way of communicating with parents, particularly of parents who have kids who have special needs. Some people do it with an email system that's on a very systematized schedule of every 3 days, at the end of the week, whatever the agreement is, that there is communication back and forth, particularly useful as kids transition into middle school. And it's very, very different. It's really important for parents of kids with learning and attention issues up front and in the first part of school to have as much communication as possible from the teachers and other related services people who may be working with their youngsters, because it is new and different. And if things need to be changed or things need to be modified or things are going just really well and we want to repeat those behaviors and we want to have the youngster repeat those behaviors, having a communication system that makes some sense makes that work better. And most teachers will tell you that it works better for them to give you information in small doses as they're seeing it than waiting 2 or 3 months and say, gosh, maybe we should change this, or maybe we should have modified this, or maybe we should have taken a little bit different approach. And so it usually is an individualized kind of thing. And again, I hate to use the IEP as the contract, but if the communication that's needed is not within the IEP, you can request not to change the program, but to really change the communication so that you're getting enough communication, particularly early on, maybe through November or December, where you'll have a much better sense of how your youngster is managing and adjusting to middle school and the demands of middle school or high school. That's schools generally, I can't say all schools, but schools generally are very interested in communicating as much as they need to get the kind of communication and the kind of relationship and the kind of cooperation back and forth between parents and schools. So schools are busy places, and I won't say that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but I do think that if you have concerns, if you do not make those concerns known, there are lots of other things that get in the way of doing that kind of communication on a regular basis. And if you really feel you need communication twice a week or a week, I certainly know in our own shop, we had parents who literally we would speak with every day or two, particularly initially, because they were very anxious about hoping that things would go the way they're supposed to. And there were other parents who simply said, wait till the parent conferencing, which was 2 months away. And if there's anything you need to talk to me about, talk to me. But schools generally are very willing to acquiesce to what is going to work best for families and for a particular child. But you have to ask.
Yeah, I think that asking is really important. And I really liked your idea of bringing it to the teacher as it's happening in small bits rather than just one big info dump, because it seems like it makes it more actionable both for the teacher and for the student themselves as well. Yeah,
and I think it then gives teacher feedback that is usable right away because it's reflecting behavior, academic behavior, social behavior, outside of school behavior that is happening in real time. And then you get a chance to intervene more quickly and probably more effectively if you get the information in real time as it's moving along.
Great. We have another question from Facebook. Stephanie asks, we moved to a new school in a new state. My daughter is having trouble making friends. She completed 7th grade but doesn't want to go back for 8th grade. What do I do? It makes me so sad and very depressed, and I know it really bothers her too. We're homesick, but can't go back. And then she asks for help. So I think, new schools is something that we know kids with learning and attention issues often struggle with. What is some of your advice there?
Well, I think new schools, and particularly middle schools, cause some very interesting dynamics. And for parents who are not only moving into a middle school, but moving into a new town, a new state, a new job, everybody has some adjustments to make. And again, schools know how to do this. They really, and again, it may not be that they're noticing it as much as they should, but once you bring it to their attention, you certainly should speak with the school guidance counselor if there happens to be one in the school. If not, there will be somebody in related services, whether it's a social worker or a school psychologist, a counselor of some sort, but may not be a guidance counselor, and let them know what the concerns are, that here's a youngster who made some friends at home, and we had to move. I'm sure there are a number of circumstances that said, we need to get a moving van and move off to wherever, Iowa, Idaho, I'm not sure where you are, Michigan, but it was a whole new world for all of us. And now after nearly a year, our daughter, who struggles a bit to make friends, is really finding it, not only is she homesick for her other friends, but that she really just can't get connected. She can't sustain connections. The things that she's used to doing don't work so well in order to make friendships work. Those are the kinds of things that related services people in middle schools have faced forever. And kids move, families move. And so again, it's making sure that you're willing to communicate and you're willing to ask the question. Excuse me. Allergy season here in Maine. And that you follow through on it. Most of the things that kids fear about middle school, certainly they fear the academics and the increased load, but will I be able to make new friends? If I came from a elementary school that fed into, 3 elementary schools fed into middle school, will I be in the same homeroom as kids that I had in elementary school in my homeroom? So those are as real and sometimes more important considerations than the academic piece and the logistical schedule of moving around a building and all those other things. So the people who work there are used to this, and they can be touchstones, they can be catalysts, they can tell you who your daughter spends time with in the cafeteria. They could, when they know her, suggest clubs that she might want to be involved with that might spawn friendships because they have things that are common. Sometimes it's really hard for kids in middle school to take those risks themselves and to expose themselves to trying to get involved in the drama club or trying to get involved in a community service club and worrying that it won't work out. That's what related services people are for in middle schools. And again, they've seen hundreds of kids who've struggled with this because they moved or middle school itself is difficult, and they really have a lot of experience creating opportunities without the child really knowing that they're creating opportunities. And so use the adults. People who go into education generally have one thing in common, and they really want good outcomes for kids. And if you have an experienced guidance person or social worker or school psychologist who's been there for 10 years, they know who these kids are. They know what the culture of the school is. They know how to create little antecedents where somebody gets out and says, gee, why don't you come to the drama club this afternoon? I listened to your speech in history class the other day. It was great. Why don't you just come down and see whether you'd like to do that? Again, as unobtrusively as possible, but this is what those people do, and many of them are just so good at it. And it's terrible when your youngster is just saying, I just don't want to go back. I don't have any friends. It was so much nicer where we lived before. Use the school. They'll be delighted. I would be amazed if they wouldn't be delighted to try to make this work.
Thank you. I think that helps give our parents hope through what can be a really difficult situation. I think a question that parents often ask is, how is it that the transition to high school is so difficult for some students with learning and attention issues, but others seem to make it effortlessly? What are some of those factors that can make it hard for some students?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that I read an article about a week and a half ago in preparation for this chat. And it was the reflections of a sophomore who was midway through his sophomore year and was asked that same question. And he said that, first of all, he felt that both parents and teachers let kids know that the stakes are much higher in high school. that what you do in high school and how you perform and how you deal with the culture and how you fit in, all of those things become eminently more important than they were in middle school. And so he said for him, the high school was 4 times as large as his middle school. And so it was huge. It was a couple of thousand kids. And he said, I really had to kind of take this and compartmentalize it, because once I found my locker, just like in middle school, it didn't move. It stayed there. So I could go back to it every day and put my stuff in it. Once I really figured out where all my classes were and how much time it took me to get from class to class, I could gauge how quickly I needed to walk, whether I could stop and talk to a friend, whether I could do those kinds of things. Once I figured out how much harder it was with some teachers, and he said what certainly we've heard a number of times, sometimes high school teachers teach the subject, they teach history, not kids. And he said, I just had to get used to the idea that this was content and they were driving content, and I had to learn the content in order to get a good grade because I wanted to go to college. For him to be able to do that, and this was a kid who was identified with learning disabilities, it really, from the self-advocacy standpoint and from the understanding the organization and culture part, he said it really took him some time to figure that out. And he said other kids who he knew from middle school struggled even more because they weren't able to see that there were similarities, that there were lots of things about high school, even if it was bigger and the volume was different and maybe it was a little more difficult just to be in high school, that there were lots of opportunities too, that you could specialize. You had a lot more electives. You didn't have to take some of the things. You didn't have to take 4 or 3 years of math. If you decided you weren't going to take calculus and trigonometry, that was okay. And so for some kids, I think a lot of it is just understanding that while there are lots of differences in high school, there are lots of similarities in high school as well. It's just for the kids who really are not very organized, the kids who don't self-advocate well, the kids who don't have a sense of how you go about in a larger setting, being as anonymous as you want to be and at the same time being as noticeable as you want to be. And so it's like anything else, but it seems that kids who have good social skills, kids who really understand the culture of high school, everybody understands it's high stakes, and so you don't have to keep harping on that. That a lot of this has to do with kids' ability to sift through and make larger spaces smaller, make larger demands chunked into smaller pieces. And for kids who are able to do that, it's not quite as scary and it's not quite as difficult as it is for a lot of other kids. But many kids with learning and attention issues just have trouble navigating the place because it's just so huge.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there, that if they can kind of look for the things that they knew in middle school and figure out those similarities and like have those as their base, they can grow. And I do think too the specializing in high school can be really helpful for kids to really figure out where they're going to excel. We have time for one more question today, and I think this is a really important one that a lot of our parents are curious about. As a kid transitions to middle school or high school, what can parents do to ensure that the IEP transitions or grows and works with them as they move as well?
Well, I think even if you move state to state, IEPs are federally mandated contracts, and I would keep saying they're contracts because they really are. And so you really have with you a document that has been put together by very good people with the best interests of your youngster at heart. And you have a right to bring that in and have people at least take a very close look at it within the sets of conditions and the construct where your youngster is now in a middle school or a high school, and to understand that it doesn't go away. We know that learning and attention issues are generally lifelong issues for most people, and maybe not as drastic as they were when they were younger, but they're still lifelong issues. And so we have to remember that these are entitlements. They're not, gee, I wish we could get this. These are entitlements, and that you, as a parent, are entitled to have your youngster get a free, appropriate, word appropriate is really, really important, education in a public school system at public expense. And you are really entitled to bringing that with you and making sure that those transitions are managed in a way that will make those outcomes as good as they possibly can be. And so parents need to see that the partnership will be different, because as 3 or 4 of the questions here have said, my gosh, all of a sudden I'm trying to manage 7 or 8 people, where before I really had to deal with one person who finally really understood my child very well. But the nature of the game and the playing field has not changed at all. That kids, until they either graduate from high school or reach the age of 22, have the protections under an IEP or a 504 plan, which we didn't talk very much about today, and that those protections follow you, whether you live in Arkansas or you live in Maine or you live in Massachusetts. That those are entitlements that you and your youngster can expect will continue to be in place as long as you need them. Happily, if you don't need them anymore, then everybody's done their job, and that's wonderful. But in the meantime, they're entitlements.
I think it's really good for parents to know that they're backed by federal law on that they kind of own those. So thank you so much, Mark. I think that was a great note to end on, and our viewing audience has expressed their thankfulness for your answers as well. So I think we had a great chat today. Thanks for everyone at home for joining us. And if you'd like to see any of our upcoming events, visit u.org/calendar. And if you can't make it, remember that all of our events will be archived on understood.org for you to watch at any time. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, Nate.